Welcome back to Behind the Blog. This is Lindsay with you once again. And then today I am joined by my friend Jason. Jason is an advisor and a strategist in the broadband industry, and we've done a couple of things together in the past. And so I have invited him to come on today to talk a little bit about price, a little bit about customer. But first, I'm going to let Jason say hello to all of you out there and just give a little bit about yourself.
Yeah,
Welcome, Jason.
thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for having me. I always love doing these sort of things. And again, I have a weekly newsletter that I have out there where I pontificate over things and put all sorts of opinions and insights out there. So that kind of keeps me current and across the board of what's going on in the industry in US, Canada, and some other places. But yeah, no, I've been in I'll call it the telecom space, the broadband space with, companies like Calix for a number of years. Before that, Juniper for even more years, and way back to the Nortel days, and companies like Synoptics and a couple other industry leaders. So yeah, I've been around for a while, and have actually, it's been fun to see the pace of innovation and a lot of the change that's happened over the last many years. I won't say how many, but the many, many years that have been behind me now, but lots more to come.
Yep, constantly evolving,
It is, for sure.
And this is almost like it's not a behind the blog today. It's like a behind the newsletter. So I reached out to you when I saw your newsletter, and I was like, "This is a really interesting article here. I really liked it. It was this Forbes article, and so tell us a little bit about it, and what like the premise of it as well, because I love what happened to Wendy's.
Sure. So the article was called, this Forbes article, it's called "Why Customer Experience Will Never Be More Important Than Price." And it talked about, I'm just looking at it as we're chatting here. It talked about how Wendy's was testing these digital price tags where they change the price based on, like they call it dynamic pricing. And, they're using algorithms to adjust the price in response to change in supply and demand and everything else. And where they thought it was great, I think there were people who didn't think it was obviously so great because they were used to paying for something. And if that hamburger was $4 and now it's $6, is it worth it to them? Is it worth the experience? And the whole notion was that regardless of what you do, you could have the best product that's out there, but at some point, price takes over, right? And that the price will always be the most important part, or will always be part of the experience. So whether or not this is the best thing in the world, if it gets to a point where it just doesn't make sense to you anymore, and I like to talk about value and such. If there's no value in it anymore for you, then you'll move on to something else, or you'll go and find something that is more of a value to you. And obviously price becomes part of that value equation. So it was interesting.
Yeah, no, and I part of what I was looking through in your newsletter, I think you said something to the effect of, value isn't just about the lowest cost; it's about the overall experience. So I'm
Right.
really glad that you touched on that. And so even when I'm thinking about the experiment that Wendy's did, where it's like, well, if it's lunchtime, it's in higher demand. Here's a $6 hamburger versus 2 o'clock in the morning. They're just trying to get rid of them. Here's a $4 hamburger.
Exactly.
It's been sitting around for a while.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm.
uh, Being able to just kind of, think about the creating the value for an ISP's customer beyond that price. So how would you kind of, flip the premise of this article kind of on its head into the ISP world, where, price and value, based upon the competitive landscape? I just dig into that.
Well, there's so many aspects to it, right? So, and I'll probably get to an answer at some point, but there's, whether you're an incumbent, whether you're in a competitive market, whether you're rural, whether you're remote, what your budget is, because I think these days, especially, people are buying with their wallets, regardless of what the experience is. And then what is that experience to you? The experience to me may be the price. To somebody else, it may be, I want a gig of bandwidth. And to somebody else, it might be some other aspect of it. Like I need more upstream, right? I need something that's symmetrical. So there's not, you can't just have one set of criteria for people to decide from, right? And just going on a tangent for a sec, the industry is so, and the market is so attuned to speed. Everybody's selling on, a gig for $60, a gig for $50. It's kind of like that Costco model where people think they need to buy that 7-gallon jug of ketchup just because it's cheaper overall, but they're not going to use it and they're going to waste it. So it's, that's where this value comes in, because what's valuable to me is going to be a different value to somebody else. And where I think the article is talking about that price will always be part of experience, I think it will be until people get to the point where there's other things, whether is it the bundle, right? Is part of, like, for me personally, part of my experience with my provider, for good or for bad, is that I still have one of these people who has TV packages. So I have TV from them, I have internet from them, and I have mobile phones with them, right? So to break that up now and to go to somebody else, it just becomes a challenge. So even though maybe it's costing me a little more, it's just not worth the aggravation to try and go and figure it out somewhere else. And then there's then there's other aspects of it. There's the customer support side of it, right? If I'm a regional provider, I've always, in all the municipal broadband things that I've done in the past, being that municipal provider carries a lot of weight. Being in the community carries a lot of weight, right? So when the big guys come to town, is that part of the experience? Is that part of the value, right? So there's so many aspects and so many parts and pieces to it that that people take a look at, but not in the end. But I think a lot of times people are they are, the price gets them in, the experience keeps them there. So you're seeing a lot of price sensitivity in the market to get people on the network, and then load in some of the value add of the experiences to keep them on.
So digging into that a little bit more, so the customers who've been with you for a long time, with an ISP for a long time, they tend to prioritize customer service. Like you just said, let's say that, one of the big guys comes in and all of a sudden they're dangling this package, but you've been with this amazing ISP that's just a little smaller, but very community focused, customer focused. Like, let's unpack that.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I've been with somebody for a long time, and I won't use the urban example, I'll use a rural example, because I think in the urban example where everybody's got a large provider who's offering the same level of lousy, it's just a matter of, it's the devil I know, the devil I don't know. But if you're in a community where you've got a community provider, you've been with them for a long time, you know how to deal with them, you're bumping into people in the supermarket, and then somebody else comes along and says, I'll give you the same for less. I think there will be some people who potentially will go. But I think in some of those environments, especially where you have that one-to-one relationship with people, or it's more of a community type of thing, I got to think there's some value in the relationship that you've developed with that provider. Look, as long as it's not a difference of 50% or something like that, right? It's got to be something close. And I think in some of those situations, maybe there's some adjustment in price to meet them, or instead of adjusting price, it's this Happy Meal sort of thing where they'll throw in more for the same price. So they'll give them something else. They'll give them a new speed tier for the same price. But from the work that we had done many years ago in some of these communities with some of the providers, the feedback that we had was that the ability to actually relate to the company locally was really important to them. And the fact that the company was investing in the community was seen as somebody who was helping support the community, as opposed to somebody else coming in just trying to extract from the community, became something that was really important.
One of the things that I always love to hear from my colleague Georgette is she says when she's working with ISPs, they say it's really important, that your service, Sonar service, is really spot on, and it's got all the things that I need to run my business, because at the end of the day, I sit in the pews at church every Sunday with my customers.
Right,
and
exactly.
I need to make sure that they have everything that they need from my business.
Yep.
And so that's where, we come into play with making sure that we've got, the right OSS, BSS solutions for these folks. But it's just, it really kind of brings home the point of community and how important that really is and really can be.
Yeah, nobody wants to be a number, right? Nobody wants to just be a number. And I suggested to my provider at one point, because when you call in, if you're calling about television, press this. If you're calling about TV or internet, press that. If you're calling about, why can't you just have one person who can be a concierge for me and take care of everything, right? So what can you do to make life a little easier? And that to me is experience. And that to me is the sort of thing that if they said, hey, look, we'll do that, but we're going to charge you $2 more a month or something, I'm thinking, all right, fine, for the times that I need it, why not? Right. So I think there are ways to to do some of those type of things and to keep people engaged
Yeah, no,
and that experience level.
yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm going to jump over to another point in the article about
Sure.
broadband as a utility. So broadband is being viewed as essential, in today's world. I mean,
Mhm.
it's almost like if you forget your phone, you go back and get it. If you can't get Wi-Fi, you're completely helpless.
Right.
There's no signal. You feel cut off from the world.
Yeah.
So does this shift the perception of the price versus value? The ability to have that connectivity everywhere?
No, well, I'm going to say no, and then maybe I'll say yes afterwards. But no, because I think it's becoming ubiquitous, right? That if I can't get it from you, I'll get it from somebody else, and if I can't get it from them, then I'll just use my phone, right? So it's I don't like making a utility example, but I can't get water from anybody, I can't get electricity from anybody, but I can get internet from anybody as long as there's a connection to my home potentially, right? So yeah, I don't not sh- I don't think that the utility model in that sense, I don't think is it a commodity? Is it becoming a commodity? Maybe, right? In that sense, but
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
not living in one of those areas, that's what makes me think of it. Like I've always lived in an area where there's been internet readily available,
right.
and to be even some of the folks that we work with are in some of the most rural parts of the country because we're
Hmm.
100% remote,
Hmm.
and it's so important for them to be able to have that kind of connectivity in those areas,
Right.
and to be able to have the customer service to make sure that they're going to get what they need.
So in that, so is the question then, does price matter when you don't have any options, or
I
right? Because
guess so. Yeah, I guess if you live in the middle of a very rural area, you'll pay whatever it takes.
well,
But can you afford to?
I think it goes back to your point about you can't live without it. So I mean, Starlink's a great example. People are paying 100, well, up here Canadian, $150 a month, right, for a decent service because they need to be connected. Um, there was an article I was reading a couple weeks ago that talked about the over 65 crowd aren't as online as other folks because of a whole digital literacy aspect, but that's something different. But they don't necessarily have the same need to be connected because they're still going into banks and doing everything that they need to do on that sense. But yeah, I think, if you look at, well, I mean, it gets into the whole discussion around if you're building in rural environments that are tough to build in, yes, it's going to cost you more because it costs more to build and it costs more to maintain and it costs more to operate. But then the experience, I think at that point is kind of secondary because you don't have any other options. So you get what you're given, or you get what's available to you, and that's all you're working with, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have the option to be able to pick and choose. It's just what's put in front of you. But I don't know. It's talking as I'm thinking. But would somebody turn around especially if they have kids, right? Kids are in school, or people that need to work. Well, if you need to work remotely, then I mean you have no choice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You have no choice. But I'm thinking about some of our customers that are in some of these really rural areas,
Hmm.
servicing some of these communities.
Hmm.
How are they really? I mean, because I'll take one of our specific customers that we have a case study about, and he has a full-time job, and his wife has a
Hmm.
full-time job, and
Hmm.
they have an ISP. They never expected to be an ISP, but they did it because during COVID, what happened was nobody could connect. They were in such a rural part of the country, and
Hmm.
so this couple started their own ISP. And so when you're thinking about now customer service, how do you balance that? Like, how do some of these smaller ISPs balance that where it's like you have to have customer service, you don't have employees, it's just you and a family member, and a community that relies on you?
So there's many stories like that, and I think you give people a break at that point, right? So if you're doing, I mean, effectively they did their neighbors a favor, and I think when you sell a service like that, it's I don't like to use the word best effort, but it is sort of a best effort, or maybe it's a crowdsourced type of thing for support. That if I'm going out of my way and they know that they set this ISP up because there was nothing else in town and they're offering a decent service and they recognize that it's these two people who are running it and what they have is better than nothing at all, which by the way is what Starlink started. They called it the better than nothing beta, and they had zero support, right? Other than some email. That's probably the best analogy, or the best analogy to use with that. You took it, you put up with what you had to put up with support, couldn't call anybody. They got back to you maybe in 24 hours. And what's your choice, right? But somebody was doing something for you where somebody else couldn't. So that was part of the experience, though, knowing, or the part of the expectation rather, knowing that no, we don't have 24/7 support. You're not going to get somebody necessarily on a Saturday at 3:00 in the afternoon, because in this case they may be out with their kids at a hockey game or something, right? And they're not going to be around. So maybe they call a neighbor somewhere else who maybe can help them out. So I think it's very, customer support, I think, is a big thing, but it's the expectation. If you know that's what's been built, and you know that's how it's been built, and you know that's how it's operating, that's the expectation. That's the experience that you're familiar with. I mean, if I go back to one of the fixed wireless guys in the US, one of the big fixed wireless guys in the US, there was a study that came out, again, a number of weeks ago, that said they have a higher customer satisfaction rate than their equivalent customers on the fiber network, mainly because they're paying less, but it also put in there that they put up with, at times, a lower, I'll call it a quality of service, meaning there's blips in the service sometimes. They're okay with that because they're paying less, right? So it's the trade-off. The value to them is in the price, and the fact that it will be available 99.9% of the time as opposed to 99.999% of the time. So it's trade-offs.
Yeah, it's all about the trade-offs.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's this has been a really good conversation. Are there any other aspects of the article that maybe we didn't touch on that you wanted to speak to?
No, I think it's outside of the article, right? I think it's the the belief that price gets you there, but experience keeps you there, right? So they didn't really talk too much about that. I don't think it's as black and white as it was in the article. Obviously, it was an opinion piece type of thing, but I think we see that over and over again, where people use low cost connectivity as the loss leader to then sell people other things, right? To sell them voice, to sell them video, to sell them security services like physical security and whatnot. But I think if you have choice, and you're offering a lousy experience, and that could be customer service, it could be reliability. Reliability seems to be the new thing that people are focused on right now. If all of a sudden I need more of a symmetrical service, if I've got latency problems, then I'll go somewhere else. So I think it's an issue, and but I think for a lot of people, they shop speed, they shop with price, and then over time, I think you get them up to a higher ARPU by helping them with those new experiences, but over time, it's the experience that keeps them. Lousy experience, you're going to go, right? So many stories about that.
Yeah, so many. But Jason, thanks so much for joining us today,
Not
for
a problem.
breaking some of this down with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back again, and we'll find another Jason newsletter topic that we can dig into.
Lots of stuff to talk about.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys all next time.
Thanks, Lindsay.